Welcome to Resilience Radio. This is Irvin Eisenberg, host of the show and owner of Resilience Occupational Therapy. You are listening to episode with Leah Sophrin talking about speech therapy, language, transgender, and gender identity. Enjoy this conversation. So in the main interview, we talked primarily about sort of that interoception, somatic, language, and cognition piece, and those groups you did. And you talked a little bit about the gender vocal improv groups. But could you talk a little bit more about the aspect of your practice working with trans folks and gender affirmation speech therapy?
Mm-hmm. So the group is called a gender diverse vocal improv group. And I think, let's see. When I started doing one-on-one gender affirming voice work with folks, it was really the first time that I had done voice work, because it wasn't something that I had done a lot around in the past. And I think because of that, I maybe went at it in a less sort of, I don't know. I mean, I say less clinical, but maybe that's not actually true. You know, there's like an approach to kind of understanding where someone's voice, what it means to them, how it's working for them, and kind of what they know their voice is capable of. Like, what is the range of their current voice? Do they want that? Do they want to speak in that range? What are they using their voice for? Are they singing? Are they talking? Are they talking in different kinds of settings, different kinds of people? You know, are they shifting between different kinds of voices? Because we all do that. So I think the approach that I had when I worked one-on-one with folks was really like, let's just gather information. Let's gather information about how you use your voice and how that works for you or doesn't work for you. And then let's explore what's easy to change about it, the things that you know, for the things that you want to change, what's easy to change, what's not so easy to change. And so there's different kinds of specific techniques for supporting people to explore releasing tension or adjusting where the resonance is, whether it's more forward resonance or more nasal resonance. There's aspects of speech that have less to do with the pitch and the resonance and more to do with how quickly you speak or how you articulate the how you articulate words. There's a lot about voice that isn't actually sound production, and more like these I guess I shouldn't say sound production, word production. It's not about word production. It's about the sounds you make when you're filling in silence, the way that you agree with someone or disagree, like those mm-hms or aha type stuff. The way that you raise or decrease the pitch at the end of a sentence. Just there's, which is called prosody. You know, the sort of all these different aspects of speech and voice production that you can talk about with someone. And so some of my individual approach is really like breaking these pieces down and just providing some education around when you speak and when you produce voice, these are all the different parts at play. And sometimes that stuff doesn't matter. Like talking about it like that really isn't the right approach for someone. Like some people really like information. They want to know exactly what's happening, and they want to know exactly what can be changed and what can't be changed. And they want to know for their voice what the degree of change can be. Other people, it's more about like, this feels good or this doesn't feel good. And they're approaching it from like the information, the science part is cool, but like it doesn't mean for them what it means for someone else.
Mhm.
Um, and so in my individual work with folks, I think just in that information gathering place in the very beginning of like just talking about someone's voice and what they do with it and what it means for them, we're sort of able to decide like which direction or which kind of framework in a sense works better for someone, because for some people all that information can feel really overwhelming and they're like, hang on, like I'm just beginning to explore like the relationship between my gender identity or my identity in general and my voice, and like all this stuff about like fundamental frequencies and resonance, and like I can't handle that. I don't want to know about it. Which is fair. I mean, everyone gets to choose how they approach that work. Um, so one of the things with voice work that I found is that the in comparison to all the other work that I've done, there's a lot more there isn't always there can be a lot more just processing kind of what's going on, and that kind of dictates the pace. Like sometimes people are really ready to jump in and like they'll try all kinds of wild things. If you're like, okay, today we're gonna hum through a straw and stand barefoot on the grass or something, like they're like, yes, I'm down for that. What are we doing this for? And other people are like, well, no, that feels too like, I can't hum because it's too close to singing, and singing feels too uncomfortable for me because of all these other, they've
Mhm.
got a different kind of experience. And so there's really it kind of moves at its own pace, um in a different way I found than some of the other work I've done.
So I guess it sounds like I would curious to I don't want to perpetuate stereotypes and
Mm,
gender stereotypes, but there's sort of a paradigm that we're of the culture we're living in.
mm,
And I think many of us sort of just are like, well, voice is just voice, and men have lower voices and women have higher voices, um
mm.
and there's a little bit of a spectrum in there, and that's about it. So I'm be curious, what are societal tendencies towards sort of voice gendered norms, and then how how are you
That's
seeing
a
that
big question,
change?
Irvin.
Yeah. Yeah, do you have any examples? And you don't obviously don't need to be all inclusive in this, but to the untrained ear who just communicates with people and might subconsciously pick up on gendered norms and
Right.
voices, what do we tend to associate as masculine or feminine?
Aside from pitch that you described, I think rate of speech, there's I think an assumption that women speak faster, and clarity that like cis men maybe don't articulate as well. Things are like more smushy. It's a real
So
scientific
almost
word.
more of a mumbly, slower, but slower, deeper,
Less
and mumbling is sort
less
of the.
space. Yeah, yeah, less space between the words. Um and slower. Yeah. I don't know, as I say these, I'm like, they're so not true. But
But that's so
um
those are the assumptions people have. But I guess I
yeah,
guess
there's
my question is, when we hear something and we immediate and obviously I'm trying to retrain my brain not to make gendered assumptions,
yeah.
but sometimes I need to break down why am I making that assumption
Yep.
beyond what I assume is male and what I assume is female. What am I likely subconsciously picking up on, and then my brain is
Yeah.
putting into a binary?
I think the non-verbal vocalizations, which are things like mm-hmm or that kind of stuff. When someone's talking, I think generally, like in that sort of context that you're talking about, men do that less. Um, there's also like all the sort of hand gestures and facial expressions and things like that, um, that are more stereotypically associated with women. Um, there's a lot about posture too. and like whether you stand across from someone or next to someone, or whether you look at them or you don't look at them, or um I think these are all things that we pay attention to, whether, and we absolutely don't realize that we're paying attention to them. um I think there's also just the patterns, that there's like, we even if we're not even if we think that we see someone and we aren't assuming their gender, when they start talking, if their voice feels dissonant to us in some reason, there's some assumptions about gender we've made that we don't realize we've made.
Hmm.
um and that is part of what is contributing to like our awareness of like that voice, quote unquote, matching them or not. So
Hmm.
I think that it's beyond really just the sound of the voice, um, in a lot of really subtle ways, and so much of that is really variable across cultures, across regions of the U.S., across like, you know, those things are not static at all. Um, like even the pitch, when you mentioned pitch, I'm trying to remember, there was a workshop that I was in a few years ago where there was a conversation about cis women in different parts of the world. Their like average speaking pitch is not the same. And just that like to be aware of that, if you're working with someone from one part of the world or a different part of the world, like they're not just automatically going to have the same pitch. So there's like not like a default there. There's a lot of cultural influence that happens. Um,
And that's interesting because we think of oh, the voice box is a different size, so there's
yeah,
so women's voices are just automatically that way. And then there's of course you're a soprano, you're an alto, like
right. Yeah.
um but that there is such a cultural that there is a large cultural component to what
Mhm,
that is.
mhm. I mean,
Interesting.
if you listened to like a cis woman from the US, like let's say the Midwest, and then someone from like a Spanish speaking country, and someone from um like a South American Spanish speaking country, and then someone from like a Middle Eastern country. There are going to be a lot of differences in that, in like what a, stereotypical woman's voice sounds like, that are all within like the same sort of, like there's nothing dramatically different about their physical voice, um like tools, so to speak,
Hmm.
but there's all these different influences in terms of what is considered acceptable or appropriate or expected for how women should talk. um so I think it's, in some ways it's sometimes not, like when I work with individuals, it's not really helpful to do too much of that kind of comparison, unless there's something that someone has decided, like I really, like if I sounded like this example, like when I hear that voice it sounds like me, you know
Hmm.
in those cases I think that there's um some benefit to that. But if you start casting too much of this like comparison net without the intention of like, um with just the purpose of like identifying differences, I feel like it becomes a little bit distressing.
I could see that. It's sort of the you're looking into societal like norms and trying to fit a norm
Yeah.
or an idealized versus trying to be authentic in who you are. And I think that
Yeah.
there's I mean, there is a tendency to view by many people to view trans people as just doing sort of dress up and trying to be someone who they're not. And I think
Right.
that by saying, oh, well, you should just train yourself in sounding like a woman if you were if you are a trans woman, and this is assuming a binary for simplicity at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
then that is sort of playing make that is not playing make believe in the sense that this isn't a woman, but it's not being authentic to what does this person being a woman sound like.
Right.
And that's
And there
and
probably are, I mean, I think there's been a lot of I don't know, I'm in a little bit of a micro bubble probably in terms of the people who I associate with who do voice therapy. I'm sure that there are people who do exactly what you're describing. That's how they approach voice therapy, that it's like, if you want to sound like a woman, this is what you need to do. And I think for a long time that was for a lot of people their experience. And I would say in the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, um, at least within the US and within like a certain, there are not a lot of let me back up. The voice world, the world of voice voice-based SLPs and voice clinicians is pretty small in the grand scheme of things.
mhm,
And so until relatively recently, I think that there weren't a lot of options for people who were seeking gender affirming voice therapy or
mhm,
voice. I don't even call it therapy anymore. I just call it voice work. Um, and that has really dramatically changed in the last few years because of a pretty small group of people who have made a really concerted effort to shift the narrative around what voice work is and who it's for and why to do it. Um, and I'm terrible with names, so I can't remember any of these people's last names. So I'll share them with you in an email if you want to share them. But there's definitely like a group of people who have really been working on that, and even in a lot of ways, trying to take, make it so that people don't think of like that they have to work with a speech therapist or a speech pathologist to work on these things, because there are a lot of really skilled vocal coaches who do this work also. And then you don't have to go through insurance. There's other ways to pay for it. If
mhm.
insurance is an issue, sometimes that's driven the conversation. Um, but I think that within the group of people who I'm aware of, um, there's been, I think, just removing the binary as part of the conversation and sort of flipping it to be like, what do you, what, who, who do you, who do you sound like? Like, what is the sound? How do you communicate in a way that works for you?
Mhm.
And, um, and then there is that sort of like, at some point people have to try things out and find out how they work for them. So if you're working in a one-on-one setting and you're learning all these different ways of using your voice, and you imagine that, yes, this voice works for me this way, but then you try it someplace and you find out it works in a different way, or not something you didn't expect. There's like a piece to the process that for some people can be a really exciting kind of experiment to engage with, and for other people, depending on their lived experience, can be really scary, and depending on where they live and depending on what their community looks like. So it's very complex, I think. And um, part of why my friend and I decided to do this group was so that from the get-go, you have a community. The people who are participating in the group have a community to be like safely experimenting with their voice around,
Mhm.
if that's the way that they choose to participate. Um,
And are you seeing many people in one-on-one as well, in addition to this group at this point?
I'm not currently.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Is that
I
something
feel
that if
like
people want to seek you out for, that you're open to, or that's
I
not your
can
preference?
I can definitely refer them to some other folks, I think, who are doing really great work. I'm currently working on like balancing work and life better, so I'm having to like draw some boundaries somewhere. But um, there are some people locally who are doing who I think are really wonderful to work with, and then there are also some people based out of other parts of the country who do like Zoom-based work that I also think are phenomenal to work with. Yeah, kind of just depends on what someone's looking for.
Yeah. And I don't want to sort of harp on a binary too much, but I somehow the talking of what's masculine and what's feminine and cultural assumptions reminds me of the Robin Williams Birdcage.
Oh.
And there's one of my the premise is there's one of my favorites. My favorite scene from that movie, and one of my favorite scenes in general, is Robin Williams is playing the more masculine in this gay couple, and they're living such that one of them, I would say by modern day standards, Robin Williams's partner is probably a trans woman, but they're just referring to it sort of a drag queen, so a gay man. And there's a scene where Robin Williams' character is trying to teach this I would say trans woman how to walk like a man,
right?
And she, I will say, because I think that's the pronoun that was tended to be used, but it was interchangeable, just kept walking in these very classically feminine, seductive ways that they might on stage. And at one point, Robin Williams like, "You like John Wayne, right?" And the character said, "Oh yeah, I love John Wayne. Walk like John Wayne." And the actor proceeded to this character proceeded to walk like John Wayne with this whole strut and stride, but it was somehow made to be one of the most effeminate looking walks. It was just like John Wayne has a lot of hip sway. He's got a lot of swagger that somehow this person doing it just looked entirely like John Wayne, but somehow came off as extremely effeminate.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, how did I do?" And Robin Williams' characters went, "I just didn't realize John Wayne walked like that." It was just one of my favorite scenes of like, somehow he's the most manly of men, and they just took out, when you just look at his walk, it's like this real effeminate sachet, and just shows the cultural context of like he was trying to accentuate the gun on his belt and all these things versus
I think it's just I don't know. I think because I've traveled a lot, I wonder if somehow that affects my perspective on this a little bit. Like, I think if you're someone who, the more you see how much diversity there is in the world and how people express themselves, I just think that changes something about the way you expect people to express themselves. I don't know how else to describe it. And maybe it doesn't have anything to do with travel. Maybe it's just mindset. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there probably can be a lot of people who travel who, without the mindset, who don't get that.
That's true. That's a good point.
Who just think, "Oh, well, the women in this country act really weird." It becomes their assumption versus, "Oh, this is another way to express and to be feminine." Or
that's a good point.
So it's, but yeah. So I think I think having exposure and thinking about it in terms of that there's more than one way to be. Anything, like not that,
exactly.
So I think that it's really, if you could send me some information about the particular class that you guys are doing, the gender vocal improv.
Gender diverse vocal improv. Totally.
I would love to include that in the show notes here so people can take a look at that. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this and delving into this conversation with me. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being curious.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Resilience Radio. If you did, you can always subscribe and get a new episode every week with a different interview or conversation about healthcare. The show music was brought to you by Aaron Marcus with their tune Some Biological Process. You can check out the show notes for full credits on that. Thank you for listening. Take care.